But from my perspective, I think the most important things is like actually understanding the knowledge, like of like computer science and how to use like the tools that we have now, be it like Python or TensorFlow. I think if you can demonstrate that, then you'll get further than like any piece of paper.
Hi, my name is May and welcome to another edition of Mathemagicians. I'm joined here by the wonderful Jordy Kieto, who is a machine learning engineer at PepsiCo. Welcome to the show, Jordy. How are you today?
Thanks, May. I'm really doing good. How about yourself?
I'm fantastic. It's a nice but cold day in New York, but nevertheless, it's great. It's great to have you here. So let's get into it. Like, what's your journey been like to becoming a machine learning engineer where you are currently? How did you get into it? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Not to like start too far back, but one of my earliest memories is like playing around on a computer, Microsoft Paint and stuff.
Really?
I've always like loved computers. I always thought it was like a cool thing. But growing up, I sort of got into like art and stuff. And computers sort of like took a back burner to that. And then after university, I found myself with like, knowledge about I studied English and drama and stuff. So I found myself like, as you do as a starving artist, just playing music.
But you loved, studying performing arts and those things. You love the arts, yeah.
Yeah, I loved, and I still currently still do love those things. And then when I was living in Toronto, I found myself going to like a lot of tech events, meetups, hackathons, which are like, tech competitions where you sort of try to come to a solution with a team or individually within a limited amount of time. Things. Yeah.
Was it at that point you started to teach yourself how to sort of code, or did you do something to get into coding?
Right. I wasn't coding when I first would go to the hackathons.
Okay.
I would just go for like the free food that they have, like pizza, drinks. And then weirdly enough, I won my very first hackathon, like my team and we won our first hackathon and stuff. And then I figured maybe this could be like a thing that I could take like more seriously. And then that's when I started teaching myself to code.
Fantastic. So what was your first sort of programming language? Like, how did you self-teach? Did you use a specific course or, free tools? What did you do?
I think the very first time that I tried like teaching myself code, it was through a website called Code Academy.
Oh, yes, I know about that. Yeah, I've used it.
Yeah. It's, I think, a great place for people to start. And the language that I used was like Ruby. It seemed like not aggressive, chill name. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So, going from a liberal arts background and now being a data scientist, machine learning engineer, how were you able to secure that? How were you able to sell yourself? It's one thing to learn the technical skills, but how did you make the switch basically?
I think part of why I was able to make the switch was because of like my age at the time. I think I was like at the same age where a lot of the people who they're like hiring into like these junior roles are coming into. So I definitely think I was lucky and fortunate in that way. I think another huge part of it was, like I told you, I was going to all these hackathons and meetups.
Yes.
And employers like actually like really like to see that kind of thing and that kind of like initiative. And it shows like a passion for like the craft. And I had like a few like projects that I had like done at the time. Yeah. And I think those were like, that was enough to get me in the door at least.
Yes. And so because you mentioned you started off as a software engineer and then you moved into a data science role.
Right.
So I guess having those fundamental technical sort of hands-on coding skills was great. And then you made the switch to more of a machine learning engineer. So how would you say being a machine learning engineer differs from being a software engineer, for example?
I'd say the things that are like asked of you exist on like different like timelines.
Is it more aggressive or?
I'd say less aggressive.
Oh, okay.
Definitely less aggressive as a machine learning engineer. With like in software engineering, a lot of times they're like creating a new feature. It's like, hey, get this header to like work and stuff, and we need this done within like 2 weeks, which is like a regular like sprint. In software, that's for software engineering. In terms of like data science, it's more, okay, we have like a theory about the way that the market works. Can you like study this for like 6 months? And you might come to a conclusion that no, we can't, like inconclusive results or something. Right. And then that's just That's just how it is.
Yeah. So again, in that same sort of line of thinking, how do you think a data scientist differs from a machine learning engineer? Because oftentimes people are trying to figure out what path they want to go down.
Right.
Like, what would you say, are the main differences, and what type of person do you feel you need to be, or you need to get yourself to sort of develop to be successful in either one?
Mm-hmm. I'll say, like, first off, like, the titles that we use in like data science, a lot of the time they're very like meaningless, I find.
Yes, it's blurry.
It's blurry and stuff. What's called something at one company might be something completely different at another company. With that said, though, I think that data science, the role of like data scientists maybe implies like more of like a research. Maybe there's an implication of like less having to specifically like use machine learning, which it isn't always like the best solution for your problem. Maybe sometimes all people need is like a bar graph, and as a data scientist, somebody who handles data, maybe like your job to like produce this bar graph, which provides insights to like these stakeholders.
Does it make it less exciting when you can't use your core neural network algorithm or whatever, like to solve the problem? Like, does it change the pace of what excited you about data science in the first place?
Yeah, I would say for me, definitely. That's why specifically I aggressively negotiated for not only like the title of machine learning, but to actually do specifically machine learning work.
Right.
Those neural networks, that's what interests me personally.
Okay.
That's not what the job has to be.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you just said with the data scientists, they're more sort of research focused, and they may not necessarily, use very complex machine learning algorithms to solve the problems. They might be a lot of the times quite simple, like a bar graph, for example. So how is the work of the machine learning engineer different from that of a data scientist then?
Mm-hmm. I'd say as a machine learning engineer, there's a huge focus on like actually like doing machine learning.
Right.
And like what machine learning looks like in like 2019, which is like neural networks, but also like regression is just like very widespread. We haven't gotten all the use that we can out of like that very simple algorithm.
Yeah.
And working on models, that's a huge part of my day.
Would you say someone that's more sort of technical is, technology-wise is better as a machine learning engineer, or someone that's more maths focused is better as a data scientist? Like, what would you pick out as sort of the key skills, either or on both sides?
I guess a machine learning engineer, if you like building like things that like a product, you know what I mean? Then maybe machine learning is like for you and stuff. Perhaps if you are more into like the math side of things and just like providing like just raw insights that maybe you won't have to be maintained in like some sort of like pipeline, then maybe the role of data scientist is better for you.
You brought up an interesting point actually with the pipeline you just mentioned, because some of the insights I've gathered from speaking to various people is like, data scientist role is great. They do all this research, they test it, and they're like, ta-da, here's, the algorithm, and hand it over to the machine engineer guy to productionize what they're doing and scale it.
Yeah.
And then often down the line, it's like, well, now we have new information about how this is being used and it's broken. How do we fix? It's like a lot of the work seems to be that the machine learning engineer really has to focus on how to make this really work at scale. And, not to say it's more important, but I'm seeing even just in terms of roles that are coming on more and more demand for machine learning engineers that can really work to produce things at scale. So how do you think the industry is evolving? Do you think we're going to end up with more? Because everyone is saying there's more data science roles, etc. But I'm also seeing a lot more machine learning engineer roles pop up. Like, what do you think the dynamics are from that perspective in your personal experience?
I very much agree with that sort of like a view of things of the industry as like there being like a limited amount of individuals who actually come up with like the initial algorithm, prove that it's like viable. And this isn't really in a way that you can really put to scale. And then there's like another team of people, probably more people who are involved in like productionizing it. I've definitely noticed that dynamic. I think the line between like who does what is blurry in terms of like titles and whatnot. I think in terms of like what that means for like the future of like the industry, I don't know. I think we'll definitely have more need for people who are able to productionize things, definitely.
Okay, at scale. Very interesting insight. Okay, so on a day-to-day level, like what are the specifics of how your role adds value to the business? Like, give us a very high level overview, especially being a product focused data scientist.
Right.
You know, are you trying to optimize for the maximum number of, buys on your product? Like, what is the essence of what your role does to provide value for the company?
So basically, my role on a very high level is Pepsi is very active across multiple e-commerce platforms, such as like Amazon, Instacart, Kroger. And we perform like a lot of like actions, marketing actions, and actions such as like raising or lowering the price of specific products. And we're sort of not sure, was what we did successful? That's like the big question in advertising. Did our ads even increase sales at all?
Right.
And basically I provide like machine learning solutions to be able to say, no, it didn't, or yes, it did. And not only that, to what degree.
Right. That's quite boggling. So what did they do in the Mad Men era when they had all, the whole ad revolution? Like, how did they measure what they were doing? Like, how has your role redefined the space in terms of what metrics they use to decide how much to spend? And now, like, how does it sort of shape, management's perspective on that? And, or is it just something they didn't really bother to measure anyway?
I'd say back in that Mad Men era, I think we were just guessing, honestly.
Wow. On a ton of money.
yeah, exactly. Guessing with a ton of money. And it's like, hey, we threw more money at XYZ and sales went up.
Yeah.
Maybe it was successful. With no real ways of like validating the assumptions that we make and stuff. I guess the value that I add now is we have people who are able to see the results that we're bringing, able to see our validation. And I guess it's we're not at the point yet where like our decisions are law. It's more of like we have people who are currently making these, adjusting these numbers, and then we provide them with our numbers, what we think they should be doing.
Yeah, I guess the other exciting thing about data science, machine learning is it's not just you can work with them on their advertising. You can, I'm guessing, and I'm interested to actually know, can your role also span creating new products? Like, can you look at data? Can you find data and insights about that and then be part of actually developing new products, not just looking at maybe data around advertising? How sort of wide sort of scoping is the work of a machine learning engineer in a product company?
Definitely. Yeah, that's a huge part of like what we have the ability to do. I personally, like I said, I work on the e-commerce side of things, but we do have other data scientists in the organization whose job it is to come up with new products. We base this off of how existing products have been successful in the market, and like what features did these products have? Like how did we market them? How did we name these products? And that's often seen as like less lucrative than the e-commerce side of things. That's sort of like the very like, we can make easy money if we can just like do that. But yeah, products, that's definitely a huge part of it. Yeah.
What would you consider as the biggest misconception within the world of machine learning from a career perspective, getting into it, or even just more generally?
I'd say from like a career perspective, there's like the assumption that there are like these walls, that there's like these barriers to entry, when it's very much like the opposite.
Right.
And so what was the second part of your question?
So I guess what I'm actually leading to is what would you say is, what would you say are the most important skills or attributes to actually possess to, position yourself to becoming a machine learning engineer? What do you need to learn? What do you need to do? What kind of person do you need to be, basically?
Okay, yeah, definitely. I'd say from very high level as a technologist, if you're trying to position yourself as that, you need to be someone who's able to solve problems. Like fundamentally, like if you can solve problems. Specifically in the realm of like data science, I think a familiarity with like the common data science, like machine learning algorithms and tools, and being able to demonstrate experience in those in terms of like personal projects.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what if I was, and it's very similar to where you came from, what if I was, I'd studied languages at university or college, and I've all of a sudden decided, rather than just opt for, maybe a consulting role, generally, I want to become a data scientist. What steps would you advise me to take practically to make that happen?
Right. I'd say take like an online course. There's like a bunch of like free ones. Andrew and G's course is like a classic one that people take. So I'd recommend starting like that, and then build something. like try to find a solution in your life where like data science would be like practically useful. I recommend it something in your life because it'll motivate you to actually see it through to the end. And then also your network. I'd say definitely like mine your network for people already in the industry, people adjacent to the industry.
Absolutely, I totally agree with you. I remember, people also are starting to add, their GitHub profiles to their resumes as a way to showcase the work that they've done. I remember seeing someone, he was getting married and he wanted to calculate before he actually got the responses back, who is most likely to say yes or no, and decide how much the wedding budget would cost before people even actually responded. So he created a whole algorithm to do that. He put it on GitHub.
That's really cool.
And then he reached out to a couple of these like wedding companies to say, look, if you want to utilize this code and share it with, and I thought it was great because it was directly related to him. It was practical, it was usable, and it can probably add value in some way and possibly be monetizable as well. So
that's a great project.
Very interesting. I guess then really curious on your opinion, especially because you've come from a different background. What is the place for self-study against MOOCs, against actually going back and saying, do you know what, I have such a liberal background, I really feel like I need to do like an advanced degree in statistics. Like, what's your take, And then you have people saying, should I actually do a PhD? What are the buckets you would put these different types of people in terms of, if you're trying to achieve this, I would suggest this because you don't really need to do that. How do you see it?
I guess I'm coming from like a sort of like biased background and stuff. I'll definitely like acknowledge that. Just because it was successful in my life, I don't know if that's applicable to everyone else. But from like what I've seen of the industry so far is that like PhDs, advanced degrees, a lot of the times if they're in data science, these programs are like very like new still. We're still trying to figure out as the industry like what is data science, how do you accredit someone for having the knowledge that's needed. So I'll say that first off for like advanced degrees. I think stats would be like a more like a classic and like time tested thing to study. And if any of that is necessary, I'd say you have to consider that like yourself, every case is different. But from my perspective, I think the most important things is like actually understanding the knowledge, like of like computer science and how to use like the tools that we have now, be it like Python or TensorFlow. I think if you can demonstrate that, then you'll get further than like any piece of paper demonstrating that you can.
So Jordy, really interested in your thoughts around some of the issues with using artificial intelligence. I was at a dinner a couple of days ago with a lady from NBC. She sits on the diversity and inclusion sort of area and trying to, increase, the pipeline of people they have coming through. And we started talking about bias in artificial intelligence and, they want to, diversify their pipeline of candidates when they're looking at new prospects for opportunities. And, there's been a lot of talk about some of the issues around that. Like, what's your take on it in terms of, what can we do to improve this or what is being done? Can you shed some more light in terms of your experiences as well?
Definitely. I think one of the first things that we need to do that's crucial is increasing the diversity in the people who are like making those decisions on a very like low level in terms of like the engineers, such as like myself, who actually write this code. I think it's very easy for like a group of people with like a homogeneous sort of like a point of view and stuff to be blind to how the algorithms that they're writing affect or don't affect a certain group of people who don't fall within that. And I think that's like in terms of like race, in terms of like women, in terms of like age as well. We definitely need like diversity of experience.
Absolutely. I think also, I was at another conference at Bloomberg, again, around bias on AI. And one of the problems they had, especially for facial recognition systems, there was a speaker there, and they mentioned when they're actually creating these platforms, the training data set is very narrow. And so it was a combination of, how do we get more people in the system to reflect, the demographics of the people we're targeting this product at? I have a friend that runs a talent agency in London, and when they try to increase diversity in the pipeline, it can be difficult to find that talent. So, on one hand, it's very apparent that, it would be useful to have a much wider demographic be a part of the build. But on the other hand, is there enough pipeline coming through to support that? And I feel like the issue is something that it's quite complex to solve, but it's definitely an issue because obviously, controlling for bias is a real thing that, we're trying to manage, and so that, it can be useful and effective to a much wider community as well.
Right.
So I guess, that kind of leads us on into sort of issues around governance. And, we have someone sort of campaigning to be elected for presidency, Andrew Yang, for example, and he's brought in a lot of, he wants to regulate big tech, for example.
Right.
He wants people to be able to control their personal data and profile, or even possibly monetize it. And that's, that's one perspective. But the other side of sort of classical economics is, if you try to control innovation and, growth and people just being able to create new ideas and let it run.
Right.
If that happens too much, it kind of stifles, the growth of an economy and the potential.
Right.
So where is the balance in all of this? We're going into this new world where technology companies have, valuations that are bigger than the GDPs of a country. Yeah. But on the other hand, if we put too much red tape in the process, are we going to stop just the growth of humanity in terms of ideas and innovations that will actually solve really good problems? What's your take on it? I know it's a very wide question, but just interested on your thoughts around governance.
Definitely. I think the point on Andrew Yang is very interesting. He's talking about imposing policies to restrict the way in which algorithms are used for in terms of political advertising. I think it's interesting how we always have these discussions in a reactionary sense. So I think that's part of the issue as well. We've already had the election that's been a compromise because of
the Cambridge Analytica issue.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that if we had people, stakeholders, people who knew where the technology was going before we reached there, and if we could talk about the implications of having that sort of technology available before it affects us, I think would be super useful. We've known about AI for 100+ years and stuff. We've been able to imagine where AI could take us. So I think we just need to be less reactionary in terms of that.
So does that mean we need tech-savvy politicians that actually understand how the technology works? Or do we need to have a committee that's very because we need people that understand how this technology works and actually envisioning where it's going.
Right.
Because otherwise, as you've said, we're always playing catch-up and trying to put, tape on it or bandage on it after. It's a very fascinating area and complex issue.
I don't know if we need tech-savvy politicians. We need politicians talking to people in the industry. And maybe, tech-savvy politicians. It was kind of when Zuckerberg was interviewed by Congress and stuff. It was kind of cringy to hear some of the questions that people had.
Right.
What is this Facebook Messenger? I'm you should be aware of that as somebody who runs our nation. Yeah.
Wow. I guess, there is a statistic that says by 2025, I believe 75% of the workforce will be millennial. And we're on the cusp of, the generation that, we grew up with computers a lot, younger than the previous generation. And I guess, as that happens more and more, what will probably happen is the places of Congress will be occupied with people that grew up with this technology.
Right.
I don't know if it will improve the situation, because now we have the next generation where they've known nothing but touch phones, for example. And it's the rate of information production, and it just keeps getting faster and faster and faster. And there's a lot of activity, certainly. Do you have any sort of salient advice for any aspiring data scientists just generally, or machine learning engineers, any sort of words of advice just generally from a career perspective?
I'd say definitely keep your network strong. Would be one of the most important things I would to say to you. Your reputation precedes you. I'd say definitely build things that you can talk about with other people as well. A lot of times you have people in interview situations, they're talking very theoretical about the things that they're doing. But if you can demonstrate that you have actually done it, I think it puts you ahead of the crowd.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure speaking with you, Jordy.
Likewise, May.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Fantastic. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode. Please do like, share, and comment below. Until the next time, have a good day.